Most men and women spend their entire earthly existence toiling endlessly, straining every nerve day after day, only to feel that true prosperity continually and cruelly eludes them. They wake up early, they work late into the night, they sacrifice their peace of mind, and yet they remain trapped in a seemingly unbreakable cycle of financial struggle and anxiety. When we observe this universal human plight, we must realize that this hardship is not due to a lack of willpower, nor is it a lack of intelligence or industry. There is a profound, invisible cause behind all human lack, and its root lies entirely in the consciousness of the individual, not in external economic conditions or blind fate. What manifests in the visible, material world is always, without exception, a faithful and exact reflection of what habitually dwells in the invisible realm of human thought. When a person lives in chronic limitation and continuous lack, it is not because the universe is inherently unjust, or because the economy is broken, or because God has forgotten them. It is strictly because there are deeply ingrained mental patterns blocking the natural, vital flow of divine abundance, an infinite abundance that the Creator ordained for every single human being from the very beginning of time. Prosperity is not a special privilege reserved for a fortunate few, nor is it a prize won by ruthless competition. It is the natural, spontaneous expression of divine love, manifesting in the lives of those who learn to deliberately tune their minds into its frequency. There is a real, tangible, and immutable spiritual law of prosperity that governs the universe. This is not mere philosophy or wishful thinking. It is a law that operates with the exact, mathematical precision of physics. The very moment the human mind aligns itself with the divine mind in genuine faith and profound spiritual understanding, the visible circumstances must reorganize themselves to reflect that inner wealth. To truly understand this foundation, one must undergo a radical shift in how they view the Creator. For centuries, humanity has suffered under the false theological assumption that God is a distant, inaccessible figure sitting on a cloud, capriciously handing out favors to some while sending trials and poverty to others. God is nothing of the sort. God is the living presence that dwells within every human being, an omnipresent and infinite good waiting to be recognized and activated through conscious thought and scientific prayer. This single understanding changes the entire trajectory of a human life. It means that anyone, regardless of their past failures, their lack of education, or their present material misery, can connect directly and immediately to the source of all good. When we examine the teachings of Jesus, particularly his masterpiece, the Sermon on the Mount, we must strip away centuries of sentimental religious interpretation. Jesus was not teaching mere moral platitudes or urging people to simply be nice. He was revealing exact, unchangeable spiritual laws. When these laws are understood and applied with intelligent faith, they produce real, verifiable, and practical transformations in everyday life. One of the most liberating truths you can ever realize is this: God never intended poverty for any human being. There is no spiritual virtue in scarcity. Lack is not a divine test of your character, nor is it a spiritual punishment for past mistakes. It is merely the mechanical result of a consciousness that has disconnected from the natural flow of divine intelligence. Just as the sun does not discriminate about whom it shines upon, warming the saint and the sinner alike, the universal law of good does not discriminate about whom it prospers. It simply responds to consciousness. Thoughts of lack inevitably and consistently produce experiences of lack. Thoughts of abundance, sustained by unwavering faith, inevitably demonstrate abundance. There comes a definitive moment in the spiritual development of every person, which we might accurately call the great turning point. This is the precise instant when you cease viewing God as an external entity to be begged, bargained with, or feared, and you begin to recognize the divine presence as the inexhaustible spring within your own soul, ready to express outwardly as prosperity, perfect health, and harmonious relationships. Consider the historical case of a woman in New York City who attended these lectures while facing dire, life-threatening financial straits. She was on the verge of total ruin. For years, she had prayed in the traditional, orthodox manner, begging, crying, and pleading with God with intense anguish and desperation to save her from poverty. The answer never came, and her situation only worsened. Why? Because her prayer was saturated with absolute terror, and fear is the exact opposite of the faith required to activate the spiritual law of abundance. Fear is in fact inverted faith. It is faith in evil, faith in lack, and faith in the power of circumstances over the power of God. When this woman finally learned the principles of scientific prayer, her entire paradigm shifted. She stopped begging from a place of terror. She ceased looking up at an empty sky and turned her attention inward. She began to affirm the truth of divine abundance from a place of quiet, intelligent faith. She realized that she did not need to persuade God to be good to her. In a matter of weeks, the mental shift took root, and unexpected, astonishing opportunities began to manifest in her external life. She was not saved by a magical intervention from afar. She was saved because she altered the fundamental frequency of her consciousness, allowing the ever-present prosperity of the divine to finally flow into her life unobstructed. This is the great secret of the ages. The foundation of all prosperity is the absolute, unshakable realization that the invisible spirit within you is the supreme cause of all your visible conditions. To master the demonstration of abundance, one must first completely unlearn the habits of traditional, orthodox prayer. Scientific prayer is fundamentally and radically different from the prayer of petition that most of humanity employs. The vast majority of people pray as though God is a reluctant monarch sitting on a distant throne, a being who needs to be endlessly persuaded, flattered, or begged to hand over something he is stubbornly withholding. This attitude, while perfectly understandable from the limited perspective of the fearful human ego, completely blocks the flow of your good because it is based on a fundamentally false premise about the nature of the divine. God does not withhold your good. God is the good. The divine presence does not need to be convinced to give you prosperity, health, or peace of mind, because those qualities are His very nature expressing themselves through you. Attempting to persuade God to be good is like attempting to persuade water to be wet or electricity to power a bulb. The principle is already perfectly in place, waiting only for your correct application. The problem has never been the will of God. The problem is always the quality and frequency of the human consciousness doing the praying. Scientific prayer begins with the bold recognition of spiritual truth before your physical senses see any evidence of it in the material world. You must firmly affirm your abundance while the bank account is completely empty. You must declare divine provision while the debts still loom large and threatening. This act of intelligent, unwavering faith is precisely what creates the bridge between the invisible realm of spirit and the visible realm of matter. Jesus of Nazareth stated this exact scientific principle with perfect clarity. Whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. Notice the grammar of the master metaphysician. The key lies in believing you have already received it in the spiritual realm, which compels the physical realm to eventually reflect it. The silence your mind must be completely stilled before any serious spiritual work can be done. You cannot tune a radio to a symphony if the dial is violently swinging between stations of static. Similarly, you cannot tune into divine frequency while anxious thoughts about the rent, the economy, or the future are racing through your head. The silence is not an empty void, it is a highly active, receptive state. It is the doorway to the presence. You must quiet the physical senses and withdraw your attention from the problem. The affirmation of the source in that deep silence, you firmly and calmly state with inner conviction that God is the absolute and only source of your supply. You must consciously withdraw your dependence on secondary channels. Your employer is not your source, your clients are not your source, the government is not your source. They are merely channels. God, the divine presence within, is the source. When you affirm this with genuine understanding, you produce a powerful vibrational shift in your consciousness. Anticipatory gratitude, the final step, is to give thanks for your prosperity before it manifests on the physical plane. To the uninitiated, thanking God for money that is not yet in the wallet seems like foolish self-deception. To the metaphysician, it is the highest expression of intelligent faith. It is the ceiling of the treatment. Debt consciousness. If you spend your days constantly thinking about what you owe, agonizing over your bills, and focusing solely on what you lack, you tune your mind strictly to the frequency of insufficiency. You must shift your focus from the debt to the infinite supply of God. Passive disbelief. This is the silent saboteur. You may pray with the correct metaphysical words, and you may read all the right books, but deep in your heart, you harbor a silent, cynical inner voice that whispers, "This is beautiful philosophy, but it never actually works for me." That silent voice of passive disbelief is 1,000 times more powerful than your verbal affirmations.